a lot of times the network's going to be the people you meet at school or the people that your professors know, because they know people and they know people, right? Like your professors know typically some reasonably successful people who are looking to hire somebody, and they are happy to recommend you. A university doesn't serve their students; it serves their alumni. So every professor wants their students to get good paying jobs so they can donate money afterwards. One of the things that you may or may not know about being enlisted in the military is the pay is pretty bad. I think I calculated once that I made $80,000 total in 4 years in the Air Force. Yeah. Yeah. Now, that said, the benefits are pretty good. It was a great role. It was really exciting to start with, but eventually, it just wasn't what I was looking for to do with my career. It was, and after about a year of doing that, I'd had enough, and left my software engineering role to go eat ramen again as a grad student. I think that's the hardest thing to do, is get your foot in the door.
Okay.
It almost always is. So, one, I recommend to anybody who's looking to change careers in IT at all,
Okay.
together. Build yourself a GitHub that showcases your portfolio. And the summer before, I had a wonderful internship with a physics professor there, studying Eta Carinae, which is a star in its last phases of life. Sounds super cool. It was a great opportunity, but what it really taught me is I did not want to be an academic because there's no application for what I was doing.
All right, welcome to the IT Connect podcast, a movement to bridge the diversity gap in technology by connecting IT professionals with minority and underrepresented students pursuing a technology degree. The podcast is hosted by myself, Kazim, the Warren Buffett of people, because I invest in people daily. I'm also an IT professional, educator, and speaker. Today on this podcast, we have quite a guest lined up for us. So today we have Doug Hamilton. Doug is a chief data scientist and managing director of Nasdaq's Machine Learning Intelligence Lab, a group dedicated to clarifying financial markets with machine learning. As managing director, Doug's responsibilities include setting the company's research agenda, providing technology-oriented due diligence for M&A activity, and bringing AI solutions to the market. Prior to FinTech, Doug stood up an advanced manufacturing analytics group at Boeing Commercial Airlines. He holds a Master's of Science in Systems Engineering from M.I.T. and a Bachelor's in Mathematics from the University of Illinois at Springfield. Thank you, Doug, for being a guest on this podcast, and welcome.
Thanks, Kazim. Glad to be here.
Awesome, man. So, Doug, man, I want to just get right into it. What is a quote or a mantra that you would say, you live by, and what's a quick story behind it if you got one?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I'd say, I had a guy who I worked with at Boeing who, I can't remember who said it, but it was, in the absence of orders, attack. And I think this is a wonderful way to live your life. It's the folks at Amazon call this a bias for action. And really, I think what it means is that so much of what we do, particularly professionally, but also in a lot of other things in our life, is reversible. Not everything, obviously, but most things we do are reversible. And really, we don't know what's going to happen next. Like, the world is such an uncertain place, and it always has been. So the only way to see what's going to happen is to try it. So, what we do is we go out, we try things, we see if they work, and then we correct. It's a very Bayesian type. In spite of maybe it sounding a little extreme, it's certainly a very Bayesian approach to the world, which we go try things, we see what works, and then we try something else. Now there's a lot tied up behind that, but I think that really I've been living my life that way since I was in my early 20s, and like many people in their early 20s, the 18 and 19 didn't go so great. So I said I had to make a change, and I signed a piece of paper and ended up in the Air Force, and then decided that was okay, but not great. So made a change, and eventually found my way here. So, you just got to do things. That's I think that's really what the quote means at its core.
Man, that's really good, Doug. And I like how you started and shared that story, because you're right. We may have a concept or an idea of what we think things would be like.
Mm-hmm.
And as you try things, unless you take action, you can't really course correct if you do nothing to begin with, right? So I love that, man. And I'm really happy you started off with that story and mantra. So, Doug, I mentioned your bio, and I know I mentioned a few acronyms that some folks might not be familiar with, but just kind of tell us from your perspective, what is it you do today? And just kind of tell us what, a day in the life is like for you at work.
Yeah. So I've recently moved into management, which means I'm a fairly useless person these days. But I run the machine intelligence lab at Nasdaq. For those of you less familiar, Nasdaq is one of the is the largest or second largest, depending on how you measure it, stock exchange in the world. And what that means is we provide the platform for people to trade financial assets, particularly equities, so stocks, bonds, et cetera. And really, our interest in machine learning is kind of in three areas. One is deriving new and interesting insights about our data. Two is as ecosystem plays, where we're trying to provide more efficient markets that are more transparent, easier to interact with. And then finally is really about how we can take our ideas of financial markets and extend them to non-financial markets as well. In a typical day, as a data scientist, you'll really engage people on my team. What I used to do when I was a useful person, you do kind of one of a few different things. You'll either be exploring data, so bringing the data in, figuring out what it looks like, how to do some basic feature engineering, or you'll be building models, which is effectively, building models, validating them, making sure they work, making sure they're high performant, and iterating on that sort of experimentation. Or the last thing you'll be doing, and this is actually something that is a larger part of corporate life than they teach you in school, which is unfortunate, I think, in a lot of ways, is kind of stakeholder and requirements management or internal business development. It's an emerging technology, so we're constantly engaged in conversations with our internal business partners. So these are people who own the product in the company, right? They're responsible for the profit and loss associated with any project, and getting them to buy into something we want to do or test out, or with external clients. So these are people who would actually be buying the thing you build at the end of the day. So those are kind of the three activities that I engage in as data scientist. As a manager now, I definitely spend a lot more time dealing with people problems, which is own kind of fun, and more time dealing with or working with kind of our corporate strategy around AI, thinking about AI governance and ethics, and helping to really advance our thought leadership in the space as a firm.
Good stuff, Doug. And I want to get your perspective. How would you define a data scientist?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, a data scientist, I think it's, even today, I think it's a little wrong to say they're necessarily an IT professional. Because I think there are plenty of data scientists who are not really IT professionals. Maybe they know a little Python, maybe they know a little R, but they might just be really, really, really good with Excel and some VBA. But really, there's kind of what we've seen is this three different threads of data scientists emerge. The first is probably the kind that we're most familiar with, which are the folks that build things like FaceNet, the facial recognition apps, the people that work on the bots that play video games at very high performing levels, people working on self-driving cars, et cetera. And those are kind of the machine learning engineers. That's a lot of what my lab does now, is a lot of machine learning engineers. The second type that we see coming up, and this is why I say, and those are really the type that would probably most neatly fit into the category of IT professional. The second type that we see are what we'll call statistical consultants, or people who have a really deep focus on advanced analytics. And those are folks who, they have enough familiarity with things like SQL and R and stat or whatever in order to bring the data into the environment. But really what they want to do is they want to play around. They want to make some charts. They want to, if they have a model, it's just to get a view of the future, not necessarily to have a deeply performant model or that's highly repeatable, but it's very ad hoc, very one-off. So these are statistical consultants. They're trying to solve or answer specific business questions that upper level management might have. And then the last category that's actually been around for a while is you could call them a marketing quant maybe, but really these are people who are have a lot of experience with A/B testing, a lot of experience understanding how a product is performing in the wild, and a little different from a statistical consultant who will be dealing with a wide array of business problems. The marketing quant really is asking questions like, we made a change to how we inform you about your ride hailing app, right? Like how we inform you that there's a deal going on. Did it work? Should we do it more? How should we segment the market, right? It's very much so focused on those kind of product and marketing questions. So I think those are the three that come up. And really the only one that would be a strict IT professional is the kind of machine learning engineer. And that's why I say I think that's probably the best way to think about data scientists today is in those three buckets. It's kind of a long answer.
No, man, this is good. This is good. I think, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, maybe more than that data scientist role, it was called a sexiest job in America. Yep. So there was a lot of buzz around it, but I still think the awareness on what exactly a data scientist does, I think that is the limiting. So you did a really good job kind of explaining the different threads that one could pursue in the data scientist space. So Doug, moving a little bit forward, what skills or competencies would be best for someone who works in your lab? And since I know you said you recently moved to management, maybe you could speak about your previous role before the management.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in a lab like ours, I think the ability to write production code is always a nice to have, but actually not the main driver for us. What we're also seeing in industry increasingly is that data scientists are responsible for building the model and have some kind of janky, doesn't really work code that designs it, and then they hand it off to a software engineering team or a data engineering team to actually productionalize it, harden it, et cetera. So more important than that, I think, is one, having a really good understanding of statistics. It just comes back over and over again. And as much as we might want to do something like throw a machine learning solution at it, right? Like import scikit-py, .train, and be done. What we find more often than not is that taking something called a parametric statistical approach oftentimes just works better, and it's simpler, and it generalizes more well. The second skill I think that people really need to bring is, I actually would not say necessarily an understanding of the domain, of the finance domain, but some notion of things like optimization and the other underlying mathematical areas associated with machine learning. Because again, you're going to be, a lot of what you do is this data munging that we call feature engineering. And, it gets a bad rap. I think munging is a terrible word to call it. And people assume that you're just kind of routing around looking for empty values, replacing NAs with zeros or means. But really, there's a lot more looking for simplicity, a lot more looking for interesting correlations, et cetera, within the data that you're going to. And then aside from the mathematics, I think the other two skills really to bring, domain knowledge is nice, but not crucial. It's something you can learn on the job, especially at entry-level positions. The last thing that you really need is kind of this systems level thinking where you're not just doing the data science, but why am I doing it? Super important, right? Because this is actually something that differentiates you as a data scientist from other people. Many people are very happy to, like I said, .train, .test, and see the magic. But if you can start to tease out how your accuracy statistics translate into business value, your heads and tails above everyone else. And then the last thing, which is everybody's absolute favorite topic that you really need to work on, and at least become comfortable enough with it that you can do it, is public speaking. Especially to many different audiences, technical audiences, business audiences. My least favorite conversations with IP attorneys. Because the reality is nobody knows what you do. So if you want people to care about what you do, you have to tell them. And you'll have plenty of opportunities to, but you have to be able to communicate that well. So I think those are the four things, right? A deep understanding of the statistics, a good understanding of the surrounding mathematics of machine learning, a systems view of what you're doing and how accuracy translates into business value, and finally, enough comfort with public speaking that you can get up in front of 10 people who work at the same company as you, maybe don't know you've never met before, and explain what you're doing, both to technical and non-technical audiences.
Doug, that's good. And, usually I feel like it normally takes maybe 15, 20 minutes when you're into a podcast to start really getting those nuggets. And man, you just came right off the bat, started just dropping them. That was so powerful, Doug. And I think I didn't learn this until maybe about 3 years ago when I joined my current company in the corporate America space. But business value, understanding how to tie things back to the bottom line for the business. The goal of a business is to make a profit, right? Yeah. So I think I'm really happy you called that out. And the other piece you really called out I really liked was public speaking. So again, if you're the smartest person in the room, but have no way to communicate the value of what you know, what you're proposing, if you can't sell it, it's going to be hard to get people to follow your lead. So I'll ask a follow-up question, Doug. How did you develop those skills, specifically the business acumen as well as the public speaking?
Yeah. So actually, a funny story about the public speaking. One of the things I always prided myself on in the Air Force is the ability. I was a maintainer, which meant I worked on the things that worked on the airplane. And one of the things that I really prided myself on was I was kind of in our section, the person who did all the training. So I really, and you have a wide group of people that go there. You have people who are, they just didn't have quite enough money for college, so they're going to do this for 4 years. It's going to pay for school. You have people who basically squeak by with, D's in high school, and now they're here, and this is what they're going to do for life. And you have to explain to all of them kind of the basics of, in my case, RF communication theory, right? That was what I was working on. So that's hard, but this is why. So I really prided myself on that. And after spending time both as a mathematician at UIS and then in the strangest little corner in the world at MIT, where everybody speaks this kind of arcane, heavily technical language, I came out of that not being able to describe what I was doing to anybody, right? And that was to my detriment. So, for the public speaking part, I think really it's one, practice, and then two is the realization that if anybody's asking you to speak, it's because they want to hear what you have to say, right? There's not a lot of people who are going to put you in front of a room of either their bosses or their peers to make a fool of yourself, right? They're not putting you up there so that they can laugh at you afterwards. They want to hear what you have to say. They value your opinion. And if you need more proof that they value your opinion when you're working, those of you who have jobs right now, just look at your bank account every 2 weeks. That is the proof that they value your opinion. So I think the public speaking portion, you just have to practice, just have to do it, and have some realization that people value your opinion and they care about what you have to say. And for me, getting over those two things was crucial. As far as the understanding business value, that was another one that I really learned a lot in my first data science role, which is, I was doing this project on natural language processing, and I was also watching a colleague of mine do one, and what I realized is I kind of got like 90% of the value after week one, and that was actually good enough for them to go save several $1 million. And my colleague who was doing it kind of was just working away endlessly to build up a dictionary, right? A translation between words, because that's what you do in natural language processing. It's a huge beat up. And the project just never ended and never got delivered. And kind of watching that, I began always thinking, okay, it ended up coinciding with this question of how do we communicate to the business. Is I was noticing we talked to the business about the accuracy of our models, that they wouldn't care. We talked to the business about why we need to spend more time on something. They may or may not care. Their goal was to get to value. Our goal was to get to high accuracy. So there's some map between value and accuracy. If we think about this in terms of finance, right? Everybody at some point thinks the stock market's made of numbers. I can go build an algorithm to do some trading. Let's see what happens. Well, every percent accuracy you gain obviously means you're going to make a little more money. And every percent accuracy you lose means you'll make less. But at some point, you got to deploy the damn thing. So while that's a very clarifying example, everything else you're going to do in business has similar analogs. Well, we can make our facial recognition application a little better if we give it another year. Okay, how much is that going to cost? A lot of money. Well, what if we just deploy it right now? Is it good enough? Maybe. Cool. All right. And those are I think, understanding how your core data science metrics translate into business value also helps you with that, communicating these very technical things to the business audience as well. Yeah.
Man, that makes a lot of sense. Good stuff. Good stuff. 2, 1. So Doug, this is good, man. Doug, do you think the data scientist as a career path has plateaued, or do you think there's still a lot of room for growth? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think some of the wind has come out of the sails, undoubtedly, right? But not in a bad way, right? Kind of in a way that things are maturing. So, if we were to look at technologies that were really hot or up and coming 5 years ago, we look at things like AI and data science. We look at things like Bitcoin and blockchain. We look at things like AR and VR. And there was a lot of hype around all of those. And what I think we never saw with VR in particular, and to a certain extent what we're beginning to see now with blockchain a little bit, is this notion of maturing. And by that I mean having some systems and processes built around what you do, and also having some of the expectations lowered, right? No one seriously talks about AGI, right? Artificial general intelligence in industry anymore. And a few years ago, everybody who did auto ML basically claimed they were doing AGI. No, you're not. What are you doing? So instead, we've seen as far as acceleration goes, absolutely at plateauing. However, there's still increasing demand, and I don't think that demand is going to go away. It's just linearized. People need data, right? The stuff's out there. People want data-driven insights, particularly as folks, more from our generation start moving into leadership roles. There's almost an expectation that things are going to be more data-driven. Consumers have expectations that their devices be smart, that the things they interact with are smart. So I think we're going to continue to see a growth of data science. We just won't see the exponential rise we've seen the last few years. I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon. I think people just have this expectation that the world be data driven, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I'm with you. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I'm going to give you a hypothetical situation here, which has probably happened to you before. So imagine you're maybe at a conference or just at a coffee shop, and a young person who's in high school comes up to you and says, "Hey, I'm a senior in high school. I want to be a data scientist." What would you advise them at that point?
So actually this happened to me earlier this year. I was doing a favor for somebody, and they sent their kid to talk to me, and they said, "I want to be a data scientist." I think they were a freshman or something, right? And the first thing I would say is, well, why do you think you want to do this? Because as I'm sure everybody on the line can tell, who's studying computer science or math or anything quantity can tell you, it's not easy, right? Like, wouldn't it be nice to just languish away in the literature department where anything is anything, and you're not up till 4 a.m. trying to figure out why your port isn't responding? That'd be great. And instead you could just, make a claim and never have to back it up with data or evidence or a proof. Wonderful. So the advice I usually give is, okay, if you want to be a data scientist, great. Here's what you want to do. Your first semester, take as many computer science and math classes as you can. It's going to be the hardest semester you've had, and you're going to figure out very quickly if you like this or not. Take Calc 1 or Calc 2 or Calc 3, whichever one you're in. Take the most advanced. Don't take like intro to programming. Take like data structures, or take dynamic programming or algorithms, right? Don't take I guess you have to take your freshman writing seminar. That'll be your third. But as your fourth course, take something like a calc-based microeconomics and have that be your social study. And you're going to find out very quickly if you like this or not. And you might not, and that's fine. But then you might, and you can kind of go from there. After that, the answer is learn to code, become good enough at it that you can do it. Take lots of probs and stats courses, take lots of math courses. I actually highly recommend people take some econ courses. I think those come in surprisingly handy in data science work, because oftentimes we talk about something called a multi-objective optimization problem that deals with trade-offs, and microecon deals with trade-offs all the time. So I think, those are the things I definitely advise them, are really like throw yourself at it, figure out if you're going to like it or not. This is one of the few jobs in America where, I can say, one of the few jobs that you can safely say, I did use the things I learned in college math on a daily or weekly basis. So, you got to like it. The whiteboards at our office when we were there have lots of upside down triangles with fancy L's next to them, and all sorts of arcane Greek symbols with arrows and topological notation. So if you don't enjoy that, it's better to find out earlier. And then if you do, it's a great career. You never stop learning. You get to work on super cool problems. You get to you go to cocktail parties, and you always have the coolest sounding job in the room.
That's amazing. And I like the way you pretty much lay it off on what you said earlier on, test and try things out. So put yourself in that, just jump in the sea, both feet. And if you don't like those math and computer science classes, you'll figure out pretty quickly that you either don't like it or can't handle it. And that's, it's better to know sooner rather than later. So that's some really good advice. So let's just say a few years pass by, this same student is matriculating to a college in a data science degree. And they're saying, hey, Doug, what conferences should I have on my radar as a data scientist? What would you then say?
Yeah, so I think there's some big academic conferences that people know of. So ICML, International Conference on Machine Learning, is a big one.
Okay.
I think they just changed the name. It used to be NIPS, but now it's gotten big. So I think it's called NeurIPS, which is the Neural Information Processing Symposium, is a big one. As far as kind of more industry-focused ones, ODSC, the Open Data Science Conference, is pretty big. People like that one. They do one on the East and West Coast. Actually, closer to your neck of the woods, one I do every year that I really enjoy called the Data Science Conference, which is hosted in Chicago every year. Really like that one. And then there's another series called Rework. Again, more industry-focused. And the advantage of all the ones I just mentioned is many times, for those of you who haven't been to conferences before, industry conferences, they're 90% somebody trying to sell you something. Those ones seem to be, actually the data science conference is 0% explicitly, and they'll yank you from the stage if you try to sell something. But the rest are, it's closer to like 20%, which you have to tolerate some of that. But those are the really good ones. And when you attend, go to the happy hour. Everybody's just going to talk about the cool stuff they're working on and the things they're interested in. Yeah, those are the big ones.
Great insight. And guys, the conference that I mentioned that's in Chicago based, definitely everyone on this call except minus Lawson, hopefully, try to find a way to make it happen. I know this year might be different because of COVID and everything, but if you think about 2021, plan a way, let your advisor know, hey, I want to go to this conference. He might just say, hey, I got some grant money that I could help you get there. So definitely, conferences have changed my life and really been a blessing to me personally. So definitely want to encourage you guys and our listeners also to check out those conferences. So Doug, really, really great information so far. I do want to, before I move on to the next section, any questions from you guys about what Doug does today?
No, but I did have a quick question concerning data engineering. I recently did Udacity's data engineering nano degree, and literally all I did was build ETL pipelines. I noticed when you talked about the core competencies of a data scientist, that wasn't in there. Do you consider data engineering to be more computer science than it is actual data science?
That's a really good question. I think that what's going on, Greg, is that we're beginning to see the role of data engineer emerge as something that people do professionally, and it's a great career to be in because it is a different skill set. right? It's less research focused, which I think data scientists are more research focused, and it's definitely more engineering like, right? You're worried about orchestration, building redundant systems, making sure you can handle incredibly heavy data loads at incredibly high speed. While those are things that a data scientist will care about, it's not the core of what they're worried about. So I think the best way probably to talk about it is that the line between where the data science starts and the data engineering seems to be right on kind of those high performant ETL pipelines. Yeah, that's my opinion at least. Different people might disagree with that though.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Stuff. Any other questions on the call before I go to the next? Hi guys, Kazim here. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. I have a huge ask. Would it be impossible for you to just subscribe to the channel or to the podcast on whatever platform you consume it? That would really be helpful to us. If you want to go the extra mile, no pressure. But if you could like this video, leave us a short review on whatever platform you're consuming this content on, that would be a tremendous blessing and will help others find this content. Hopefully, this can be life-changing for you. And this is a way you could easily pay it forward and allow this content to be life-changing for somebody else as well. Thank you so much for your time. I don't take it for granted. Have a wonderful rest of your day and have a blessed week. I appreciate you.
Hello.
Hey, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I got busy and I got carried away. I told you I didn't get the trend of the talks and everything. But this is just a humble and open question I'd like to ask. As a new graduate of data analytics at UIS, I would love to ask, to be able to launch into the data science platform and possibly grab an opportunity out there, what is the most basic skills or I need to have, or what do I need to know just that are very basic to...
Yeah, so I think that if you're asking like, how do I break in and how do I convince people that both I'm serious about this and and that I know what I'm doing? Yeah, great questions. So, I think that's the hardest thing to do is get your foot in the door. It almost always is. So, one, I recommend to anybody who's looking to change careers in IT at all, together. Build yourself a GitHub that showcases your portfolio. It's almost like you're an artist and you're showing people that here's what I can do. Yeah, and it's going to prove that you're serious because it means that you've done some work on your own where nobody paid you to do it related to data science. Maybe try to solve a couple Kaggle competitions with it on it. That'd be great. Other things you should probably do is show that you know how to do some basic machine learning work. Understand how clustering, unsupervised and supervised learning work. Understand basic data science workflow of training and testing and validation. And then finally, I would say it's a good idea to understand some basic statistical testing, like how we do A/B tests, t-test, chi-squared, etc.
T-test distribution and all of that.
Yeah, exactly. And the more of that you can showcase either on your resume or in your Git, right? Because that's how people are gonna, breaking in sucks because at some point a recruiter has to see it, and the recruiter doesn't know anything about what you do, so they're looking for keywords. So load your resume up with keywords. Then it's going to go to a hiring manager or one of their lead technologists, and they're going to take a look at it. And the first thing they're going to do is say, "Oh, there's a Git. Let's see what's in it." And as soon as they check out your Git, they're gonna have an idea about whether or not they want to hire you or not, or if you know what you're talking about. So I think, and then they'll bring you in where they'll ask you questions. And the more you can answer questions about machine learning, the better. So I think those are the things, right? Statistical testing, basic machine learning workflow, have a Git that showcases some of that. I think those are the things that you'd want to do. And load up your resume with all the buzzwords, every single one. Somewhere.
I really like that you called out the buzzword piece, because I've said that to Aaron in the past, actually. It's very common to have a recruiter who does not understand the space you're in, right? So I thought that was just really good advice. And for anyone listening, really, understand what those buzzwords are and what they look for. Because again, they will not particularly be able to understand exactly what you do. But if you could at least hook them in and let them go look and connect with a decision maker who actually does understand what you do, then you put yourself, give yourself the best opportunity for a potential interview, which is what you want. Because for most people, again, who are committed, once they get that interview, game on, right? It's just getting to that point, getting that toe in the door, right? Absolutely. But great question, James, and great response, Doug.
Yeah. And the other thing you should absolutely do is interview a lot, because half of getting through these interviews is learning what questions people ask. Is they don't for whatever reason, people haven't figured out they just interview 100 times now. And they ask super technical questions, and there's one person who just knows them. And the reason they know them is because this is their 100th interview. They've heard this question before. They worked it out at home. And now they're just going to be able to answer it. And it sucks because that's what you're up against whenever you go to interview, is the person for whom this is interview 30. And this is my 30th time writing out the Fibonacci series as a dynamic programming problem as opposed to a recursive function. And I just know it, and I look really good when I write it out.
So one more question. Though I'm thankful that I've had quite a good number of interviews, and it's kind of has exposed me to a lot of things and interviewers. I get a lot of calls. So what would you advise me accepting an offer maybe from a recruiter on a contract basis, or just look out for maybe Fortune 50 or 500 companies that will come around for recruitment? What would you advise? I don't know. The reason I'm asking is sometimes you don't know how long the contract is going to last. Yes, they may tell you 1 year, and after 1 year, it may just be 1 year. So you may have to start looking for another job. Or what would be your advice on this one?
Yeah, I think it's tough to answer that for any individual person. I'd say if you're trying to break in, the first thing to know about contracts is if it's a 1-year contract, usually there's an option to renew. But you are both tied to each other for that year, something along those lines. So that's why they call it a 1-year contract. We've had contractors that have worked for us for decades, still on contract. It doesn't hurt if that's what you're getting and you want to break in to a certain extent. I mean, in my view, to a certain extent, just take it and in a year change jobs, or in a year start floating your resume again. No one, especially if it's your first role, no one asks too many questions. At the same time, you might be in a position where you have to wait for a full-time role. So, it's hard to answer that without knowing more about your situation, but I'm a firm believer that being able to get on your resume, I have a year of data science experience, is better than not having it.
Yeah, I second the motion on that. Look, I think that's the exact advice I would give. So yeah, James, great questions, man. Thank you so much for that. And I love it, guys. I love like I said, I think the questions and the interaction, that's how we all learn. So that's really good. So Doug, I'll move on to the next segment here. So Doug, tell us about your family, kind of this, your background and deciding to even pursue a technology degree in the first place.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually grew up in the Boston area, and nobody in my family is a technologist really. So what kind of let me here? That's a good question. So I was pretty good at math all throughout high school. I took some AP physics classes. I had a rough transition to adulthood from 18 to 21 that involved getting into a little bit of trouble, working on a farm for a little while. We don't go too much into detail there, but I don't know if any of you have met an 18-year-old young man, but they might be the dumbest people on the planet. I sure know I was. So after that, right, I enlisted in the Air Force, and I began working on as a calibration technician, which is kind of a low-level electronics technician really. And it's okay. This is kind of cool. I'm kind of enjoying this. There's kind of this thinking aspect of troubleshooting things and fixing equipment that I like. Working on kind of these technology stacks I kind of like. I like the training portion of it. Actually, that's what led me to UIS. Is I remembered, I was really good at math, and I wanted to pursue a degree in math. And in 2008, UIS really was the only place that had a serious math program that you could at least partially complete via correspondence, right, online. That's what led me there. After completing the military, I moved to Illinois to finish on campus for a year and a half. But tragedy struck because I was taking a very theoretical course work through the math department, which is a lot of complex analysis, real analysis, topology, that thing. And pretty sure I wanted to go to pursue a PhD and go write papers that nobody will ever read or care about. Until the summer before, I was slated to graduate in December, and the summer before, I had a wonderful internship with a physics professor there. Studying Eta Carinae, which is a star in its last phases of life. Sounds super cool. It was a great opportunity, but what it really taught me is I did not want to be an academic because there's no application for what I was doing. And I didn't really know what to do, so I stumbled into if you're a math major, you don't really know what you want to do anymore. You're not going to go pursue an academic career. You're kind of left with one option, which is, math is like logic, and logic is like software. Maybe I can write a little software. So I ended up getting a role as a software developer for a year. And that's kind of what that really brought me back to is, the job itself, again, great opportunity, because you always say it was a great opportunity. But it's kind of boring. It's kind of a boring role. But it reminded me that I love building stuff. I like building new things that the world hadn't seen before. I like solving problems. And that's really what drove me to fully pursuing a career in engineering or in technology, rather than, at the time I was thinking maybe I could go get a master's in finance or something, or an MBA. And yeah, that's really what did it. And from there, the rest is kind of history. I applied to a few colleges. I got into one of them, stood up this advanced analytics lab at Boeing, and then ended up at Nasdaq. So yeah, that's kind of the full story. I spent a lot of time doing nothing and being stupid, realized that wasn't a very good strategy, a good long-term strategy. And eventually found myself in a position where I got to test things out, remind myself I liked solving weird little problems in technology, and that was it.
So you gave us a lot here, man. I want to unpack just a couple of them.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that you mentioned the internship. And you know what? I was a similar way. I did an internship at LSU, again, academia, and my mentors pretty much had groomed me, one track mind, PhD. I was just like you in that regard. And I did feel like, do I really want to do this after that first internship, or do I do the second one? But what I like the fact that you did that internship first and foremost. And I want to get into, that period between completing UIS and then eventually getting to MIT, and help us understand how the software engineering role fit in that timeline a little bit.
Yeah, so I completed UIS. I started in December of 2013. And then in January of 2013, I started the role as a software developer with a company called Fast Enterprises. And what they do is they build kind of state government systems. Think enterprise software for state governments for tax compliance, the DMV, that sort of thing, unemployment distribution. Which is an important thing to do. I started off in January. The position was in Little Rock, Arkansas. It's a very different sort of place. Actually, it wasn't that different. I'd lived in Biloxi, Mississippi before, so it was kind of similar to that. In that it was hot and humid. So I started off, and I was pretty enthusiastic when I started because it was a new job. And like I said, I think on day one I was asked to. It was something silly like, "Hey, we need somebody to write some code that converts that tells me, given what day it is today and given somebody's birth date, how old they are." It's actually a tricky little problem when you start factoring in leap years, right? So I did that. Like, oh, that was kind of fun. Let's do this again. And we spent some time configuring workflows, implementing their core software stack. I'm really proud of it. I have a fake ID, which is from Arkansas, which is a sample ID because I wrote the code that helped print the IDs.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was pretty proud of that one. I've still got a couple of those hanging up. And that really, what it reminded me of was two things. One, like I said, oh man, I really like solving these little problems. But two, I didn't get to flex any of that mathematical muscle I developed. And I really wanted to do something where I could. And what I kind of realized is I graduated UIS with a pretty good GPA. I had kind of a cool title at the time. I had pretty decent GRE scores. I could go apply and try to find one of these roles that really would combine my love of building stuff and solving problems, my interest in mathematics, as well as being able to take a slightly more systems level view of things by looking into some of these systems engineering, operations research programs, and kind of. And I found the one at M.I.T. I think I was going to apply to like 5 or 6 schools total. They were just the first one, and got in. That was great. So yeah, that's kind of the story there. Is it was a great role. It was really exciting to start with, but eventually, it just wasn't what I was looking for to do with my career. It was a lot of kind of writing the same software over and over again, and it got very repetitious. And after about a year of doing that, I'd had enough. And left my software engineering role to go eat ramen again as a grad student.
That was my next question, Doug. It takes a lot to do that and take that leap and say, okay, I'm going to leave this fully paying job with benefits and retirement and everything, and then go back to student life, which we all know is the hard knocks life. That in mind, talk about how you approach financing your college, both undergrad and graduate.
Yeah, absolutely. So for both of those, the answer was pretty singular. One of the things that you may or may not know about being enlisted in the military is the pay is pretty bad. I think I calculated once that I made $80,000 total in 4 years in the Air Force. Yeah. Yeah. Now, that said, the benefits are pretty good. So I was determined to take full advantage of them. So for undergrad, I paid for a little bit of it out of pocket, but mostly with tuition assistance from the military. And then afterwards, the GI Bill. The GI Bill was great. So remember how I said that I made about 80 grand in the Air Force in 4 years? I used about $150,000 worth of GI Bill.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was like, why wouldn't you? So that definitely helps, right? Because they pay up to the highest in-state tuition for a public school for whatever state you have to be going to school in. So I had to pay some out-of-state resident stuff for UIS when I was there, but that's a lot less than the full tuition, and that was kind of an amount that I could use my savings to pay. Then my savings plus that internship to pay. For grad school, then I again was able to leverage the GI Bill to cover. GI Bill probably covered about 65% of the grad school bill, and then the rest was a loan from a large bank. It was a loan from a large bank. But the GI Bill definitely helped a lot because it basically meant I left grad school with a loan for a nice car rather than a small house. So that's how I basically approached financing. While I was in grad school, I found some opportunities to do some teaching, be a teaching assistant for a course or for a boot camp, really, and that helped out. So it worked a little bit while I was there. But yeah, tried to leverage savings as much as I could. Tried to leverage. My last 3 months, once I knew I was leaving Little Rock, I didn't do a whole lot. I saved up a lot of money. Those 3 as much as I could, and by the time I was done with grad school, it had dwindled pretty considerably. But
that's good, Doug. And I know we have some folks who on the call who are thinking about the military route. And yeah, it's good to know that the GI Bill is that flexible and could really help you advance your educational goals. And that's a blessing. The other thing I like that you mentioned is, seeking for graduate assistantships. Those often come with some kind of tuition waiver at certain schools or some kind of benefit. So I definitely want to encourage our listeners to get on, seek those opportunities to cut costs where possible when you find out trying to get your degree. The next thing I wanted to get into over here, Doug, is let's talk about how you actually got that job. So after MIT, did you do another job before getting to Nasdaq, or was that your first out of MIT?
No. So the job I had before Nasdaq was with Boeing.
Yes.
And this is another one of those areas where it's kind of tricky. So I guess there's two parts to that question. One is, how did I become a data scientist at all? Because I was at the time I was kind of thinking, okay, well, there's three tracks I could pursue. One is this data science thing, or this kind of quant thing. One is this management consultant thing, because anybody who's ever been, because at the time everybody wanted to be a management consultant, even though no, you really don't. And then the last was product management. And the first thing I'll say is, if you keep getting to the same point in an interview, especially for a role that's not a technical role and not advancing, that's the market trying to tell you something, and that's the market trying to tell you you're not cut out for this role. And I wish I had listened to it earlier, because the market was telling me, Doug, you're not going to be a management consultant. Just fine. So I found some traction with these product management roles, but ultimately I found the data science stuff really late. And I interviewed for a couple positions in the Boston area, and I knew somebody out in actually at Boeing who knew the people who were standing this up and kind of recommended me. So, I guess there's two things there, right? One is you got to leverage your network. It's so important. And, a lot of the times the network's going to be the people you meet at school, or the people that your professors know, because they know people and they know people, right? Like your professors know typically some reasonably successful people who are looking to hire somebody, and they are happy to recommend you. Because, well, the cynical side of it is, if you look at the finances of a university doesn't serve their students, it serves their alumni. So every professor wants their students to get good paying jobs so they can donate money afterwards. So leveraging your network, definitely. And the other one was just applying, listening to what the market's telling you. And once you hone in on something, it's amazing how different it is. Like I said, I was getting basically management consulting. There's kind of these 6 interviews you go through. I was getting to interview number 3 consistently. They would ask me the same question. I would give the same-ish answer, which was, okay, so what if you can't get any more data? What would you do for a particular scenario? And I'd say, well, that's a weird question. You want me just to speculate? That sounds like a terrible answer. And that was actually the answer, is you should just speculate. So, okay, fine, we'll try something else. Tried the product management thing, had more traction there, but not a great deal. More traction. I ended up getting one offer for a product management position. So a little more traction, but really as soon as I found the data science thing, it was just every single interview went to the end. Every single half of them ended up with the offer, right? Like it was just night and day. It was the market telling me, this is the thing you're good at. This is the thing you understand. Go do it. So yeah, leverage your networks and listen to what the market is telling you, because it's trying to push you in a direction that meets where your skills, your abilities, and your interests are gonna fit a need, right? It's really a harsh teacher, but it tells you the things that you need to know or you need to hear.
I like the way you put that, Doug. Yeah, it's a harsh teacher, but it's the truth, right? It tells you what. Just facts. It doesn't give you any kind of school information. Right. So, something you said I really liked was the fact that, you should leverage your professors, because actually, guys, the way I connected with Doug was through one of his past professors. The head of the math department said to me, hey, there's this amazing guy who was recently recognized for an award, which I'm about to get to in a second. And I'm like, what's his name? And then that's how we got connected. So definitely, I think that's some really good idea. And I love what you said. The institutions serve the alumni.
They do. I love that. Your university, especially as a senior or a graduate student, it's absolutely like there's a brief period in university where they're trying to filter you out, and that's like the first 2 years.
Yep.
After that, they want you to have a job. They want you to graduate. They want to work with you so you'll be done and happy, so that as soon as you leave, they can start hitting you up for money. I can tell you that. So one of the advantages of graduating from MIT is you get a subscription to something called the Technology Review. And when I move and tell them where I live, they can't tell the technology review where I live. They don't send it to the right place. They're still sending it to the address I lived at like 5 years ago. However, every time I move and I don't tell them, their alumni relations department finds me within a day and asks for money, right? So they want you to find a job. They want to work with you on this, and every single professor wants you to be that's in your department wants you to be successful in the things you do, and they know people. So if you have a professional network that you can leverage among your peers, great. And if you don't be shy about asking your professors to see if you can begin leveraging their network.
Great advice, Doug. And so your degree from MIT was in systems engineering, was that it?
Yes.
And if I make sure I heard you correctly, so you're saying you were going the management consultant route and then eventually pivoted to the data science track.
Yeah. So I think the reality is I was going to the data science track the whole time because I took no coursework that would have, I didn't take any management coursework. I took like one accounting class. I didn't take any marketing courses. And the reality is, I don't have a personality that would be amenable to patting somebody on the back and rubber stamping their pet project. So it just wasn't going to happen. Meanwhile, the courses I did take were, multi-objective optimization courses through the aeronautical and astronautical engineering department, or systems optimization, some analytics and machine learning courses through the stats and econ departments, right? Like everything about it was telling me what I should be doing, and I was just not doing it. It turns out I was still a little bit stupid.
Now, going back to MIT, when I think of MIT, Ivy League and everything, you think, the best of the best. Talk about the challenges of MIT, just academically.
Yeah, it's a rigorous place. It's hard, and it's a lot. So, fun little story first. So both Harvard and MIT offer a lot of their courses online for free. And a few years ago, I was trying to learn something called information theory, and both Harvard and MIT had their versions online for free, including the problem sets associated. And what I noticed is the Harvard one, so this is going to be my opportunity to talk a little smack about Harvard, had 4 questions in each problem set, and the MIT one had 7 questions. The first 4 questions were the same, but as you know from your own problem sets that you've done, the first question is kind of plug and chug. The second question is kind of plug and chug. The third and fourth are a little bit tricky, and then they get harder and harder. And by the last question, you're being asked to prove something that's never been proved before. So it's hard. I think I would wake up at 5 a.m. every day to get the 5:30 subway to class or to campus, and then I'd basically stay on campus working till 12:30 at night every day.
Wow.
6 or 7 days a week. Yeah, so it was a lot. And that's driven by a few things, right? I think it's driven by some competition among the professors there. Nobody wants to be the easiest professor. It's also driven by the fact that, what's different is it turns out they don't teach you the wrong thing at UIS, right? Like they don't teach you that the first derivative of x squared is equal to 3. Just 3. It's always equal to 3. No, they don't do that. They teach you the same stuff. It's just that they make it more and harder because there's more people around there who want it to be harder. So those 2 factors when they combine, and then finally when it also kind of mixes in with some own feelings that you might have about not belonging there, which lots of people have, really end up being kind of this unholy this unholy trinity of professors competing to be the hardest, plus you demanding it, plus also feeling like you're not good enough, so you always have to work harder to prove that you are, and everybody else also doing it, really makes it an incredibly rigorous and academically intense environment. And they have their own problems around that as well. But yeah.
Thanks for that, Doug. And so just could you walk us through, I think after Boeing, kind of how you found your way to Nasdaq, and how has that experience been for you?
Yeah. So Boeing again, right? It was a great opportunity. It really was. It was a great way to start off a data science career. Cool projects to work on, and if you ever got bored, you could walk down to the factory floor and slap an airplane. So that was kind of cool. But it was a slow world. And, it's a manufacturing world, so there's a lot of there's a lot of people who've been doing it forever, and they got to their position by kind of having a viewpoint and not necessarily being data driven, not necessarily trying to be innovative, but more trying to just hammer away at the problem, or hammer the problem out the door until it's done. So I think there was some cultural mismatch there at the end of the day, that led me to, after 2 years at Boeing's, begin looking elsewhere. So again, what kind of ended up happening with this role is I was looking for anything, and I noticed kind of the role literally when I was sitting at a stoplight on the way home from work, because that's how easy it is to apply for things today. And I more or less applied to it while sitting at the stoplight.
Wow.
Yeah. I did know somebody who worked at Boeing, at Nasdaq as well, so I reached out to them, and kind of that helped get your foot in the door, because again, your network, it's always important. Yeah. So that definitely helped. The interviews went well, and we started, I think, I interviewed in April, and I moved across country at the end of May to start work here, and it's been good. I think this has been a very good fit. It's very fast paced. It's very experimental. It's the focus recently has very much so been on the portion of data science I'm most passionate about, which is kind of process automation work, or the machine learning engineering. So it's been a great fit. And on top of that, one of the unique things about Nasdaq itself is there's very few places in finance where you can really talk about a common theme among finance is that what you're doing is making rich people richer. And there's some of that. There's definitely a lot of that goes on. But at Nasdaq, I think you feel like you're really powering the financial markets of the world, which something that gets a bad rap. But the reality is, if you want to help impoverished people, if you want to help poor countries become wealthier, if you would like to see a rising tide that lifts all ships, and see that tide rise faster, you need safe, fair, liquid markets that help capital move around. Otherwise, without that, we end up living in a world where it's just people giving money to their friends. But safe and transparent capital markets really allow us to take risks we otherwise wouldn't with people we've never met before.
That's good, man. I appreciate you sharing that, Doug. And what would you say, Doug, what advice would you give, and reflect on the skills or the things you've done that helped you rise to the ranks at Nasdaq? What advice you would say to really help stand out and rise to the ranks at an organization? Yeah.
So the first thing is, I guess, moving into finance from other roles. Most people who end up in finance come from some other field. The kind of typical person in finance was studying physics, decided they didn't want to eat ramen noodles anymore, and applied for a job. So don't be too worried about that. For me, I think basically in January, I decided I didn't want to work in aerospace anymore. So I picked up a book called A Primer on Financial Engineering and started working through that. And that kind of got me all the background I needed. From there, I think a lot of the things we've talked about already, Kazim, right? Things like being able to communicate to technical and non-technical audiences was very big. It was a real differentiator. Thinking about what I was doing in terms of that value proposition to the business, right? I had a project early on for something we were doing called Analytics Hub, where we were looking at data and trying to figure out if it was going to be of any value. And so I spun up a project. One way to figure out if data is of value to an investor is to figure out if you can build a strategy on it, right? Can I build a strategy that makes money? That's kind of what we would do. And so I said, well, if we could automate this, we could just onboard lots and lots and lots of data and very quickly see if it's any good. So I worked on a system to automate that. And the focus really was, how can we use this to scale a business, right? And so now we're talking about the business problem. So I think those two skills really helped. And then the last one is, I mentioned that automation part. When the group started out, it was really kind of focused on the analytics, right? The statistical consulting portion of data science, though a little more with a product flair. and what we kind of realized over time is this notion of scale, this notion of novel insight, this notion of automated or machine-powered data streams really was very attractive, and I just kind of been doing that work. So it seemed like a very natural fit for the management position. But I think more so than that was being able to understand the business problems, communicate technically, communicate non-technically as well. That were most helpful in kind of rising up through the ranks.
Gotcha, man. And just to kind of piggyback on that was you got an award 2020, IDG CIO 2020 Wants to Watch Award. So just talk about how that felt, man, getting that award and what it means to you.
It was very flattering. It was actually a little awkward because I don't do well with winning awards. I always get people congratulate me. All right, so we're going to peel back the onion on this one a little bit. The reality behind all these awards, whether it's Forbes 30 under 30 or this one, is the marketing department at your company paid them some money to get you on the list, right? That's the reality. Every single person who's on the Forbes 30 under 30 list paid Forbes some money to be considered for that list, or to be on that list. Anyway. Onion peel back. But really, I mean, it was quite an honor because it also means that the company's happy with you and they want to put you forward as a face and leader in the industry. So that was very flattering. And I think really what I'm most surprised about in finance is how new and novel machine learning is, right? I thought, because my thinking is there's any place on the planet where this is old hat, it would be in finance, because there are quantitative trading firms that have been doing machine learning and neural information processing since 2002 or 2001. I think we can find papers about reinforcement learning for trade strategy generation from the late 90s and early aughts. So you'd think it'd be old hat, but it turns out that's just this really tiny portion of the world. And those people don't spend a lot of time talking about what they do to normal folks. So instead, it's this kind of really new, novel thing. And I think it was a recognition on Nasdaq's behalf that they want to move, that data science, AI, machine learning are important to their strategy. It was definitely very flattering for me to receive. And I think it was almost as much a statement by the company about we take this seriously as it was flattering for myself. And like I said, I don't do well with winning these sorts of things or talking about them. But yeah, it was good. It was cool.
From a career perspective, where do you see yourself, in the next 5 years?
Oh man, I'm really hoping on a beach somewhere drinking. More like, actually, probably not, because I burn in like 2 seconds. I'm pretty happy at Nasdaq. I'm hoping that we can keep making it work there. Like I said, I currently kind of am responsible for our AI research department. If I were to think about my career at Nasdaq, I think the next natural point is, in 5 years to begin looking at owning the entire AI life cycle from research, from data onboarding to research, through initial development and model serving and deployment. So that's a few teams. And I've been not terribly shy mentioning that as far as I can tell right now, I think I'd like to be a corporate executive, but that could change, right? And really it could, because the one other thing I've learned and in my career is it's not obvious that anybody would want to be a corporate executive. I feel pretty maximally busy right now. My life is full of lots and lots of uncertainty. I remember I was going to Chicago on a business trip last year, and I thought it was a 4-day business trip. So I packed 4 days worth of clothes. And on day 2 in Chicago, I got told, Doug, you need to go to Lisbon. And that sounds cool, right? Like that sounds kind of cool and sexy until you realize you're living in a hotel for 10 days with 4 days worth of clothes. And and you're, and business trips aren't fun, right? I got to see Lisbon through a 4x3 window in the conference room that I was in for 16 hours a day. drinking a lot of really bad coffee. Yeah, and by the time you're done with the day, all you want to do is go back to the hotel and go to sleep. Or best case scenario, you go to the hotel bar and have a few really overpriced priced beers before going to sleep while you're doing some work. So it's not obvious that anybody would want to do this, would want this sort of career, but I do also secretly kind of like it.
Man, that's good, Doug. Guys on the call, any other questions, again, about the lab that he runs or just what they do? Any other questions along those lines before I move on to the closing segment?
Hey, I had a quick question.
Yeah.
Way early back, you mentioned advice that you give to students trying to get into the industry or whatnot. You mentioned GitHub.
Yeah.
And that advice is usually given a lot, but I want to go like one step further with that and ask a question. So given that advice, I assume that was something that you did.
No, that's not something I did.
Okay.
No. So Aaron, the world today is a little different than it was back then. And the world of data science has changed very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you in 2015, there just weren't nobody had the title. Lots of people didn't even know what the role did.
Mm-hmm.
There was no such thing as a master's in data science program.
Mm-hmm.
Or to the extent that there was, it was literally, they were bad. They were really, really bad. People were pretty sure that visualization was going to save the day. It didn't. So there was kind of the, and there was nobody who had done this, right? So the competitive landscape was also really different. So if you were somebody who could code and also knew some math, you were kind of in, right? Like that's the big advantage I had. If I were to take the skills I had in 2015 and try to become a data scientist today, it would be a lot harder. Right? It just would. So because the competitive landscape is different, because there's people who have certificates in data science and master's degrees in data science, or because they've gone to like a boot camp or done a Udacity course in it, right? So the point of the GitHub really is showing that you're serious. It's showing that you're willing, that you've put in the work, and this isn't a passing fancy, right? Like I could tomorrow go say I want to go into private equity, right? I want to be, everybody knows Bain Capital now. So Bain Capital is actually just down the street from where I live. I want to go do that. Okay, well, why? Are you serious about it? I don't know. If you do that and you have a certificate, you have anything you can show that says, yes, I'm serious. You have CFA, CAIA, these are certifications. All of a sudden, you look a lot more serious. So your GitHub is kind of the equivalent of that certificate. It's you being able to show that I'm serious about this. It's not that I saw the role and thought, oh boy, wouldn't it be cool if, or, let me get my foot in the door and I'll learn it on the job. It's showing that you're serious about it and that, you have something you can contribute on day one, and that you're not going to use it, and you're not going to just show up and try to learn on the job there for a year and then bail to the next place that might pay more money. That's really what it's kind of about, is showing that level of commitment.
Okay, that makes sense. All right.
Any other questions, guys, before I move to wrap things up? All right, Doug, so just a few, we'll kind of hit those rapid fire questions for the next few. The first one, Doug, we know that minorities, most African Americans, tend to be underrepresented in technology.
Yeah.
What would your advice be on just, giving that bit of encouragement or just, just a guide on, how they could possibly skill up and stand out in that space?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll try to do these rapid fire, but I'm not good at rapid fire. So I think there's two challenges there. Well, the first thing I'll say is technology is a really diverse place. If you look at a typical technology team, so I'll use my team as an example, my partner team, the software engineering team, let's be frank, there's 12 people on the team, there's like 3 white guys on it, right? Now, with that said, the type of diversity that exists in technology is a very particular type, and we could probably see that same, and you're absolutely right, like we know that both Hispanic and Black Americans are grossly underrepresented in technology right now. I think everybody realizes that. So at the same point in time, as opposed to any other role, at no point in time in your interview process in technology is somebody going to ask you about who you know. At no point in time is somebody going to ask you about, who you would sell to, right? Or the state of the industry, especially at the entry level. They're just not going to ask. They don't care, right? Like, they're not hiring you to be an expert in the field or to leverage your Rolodex or anything like that. What they want to know is what you know. Can you solve weird technical problems? So to that, in that regard, it really is a meritocracy, and not perfect, but it is then, right? Like, if you can get to that interview point, it's really all about what you know, and not who you know or where you're from, or if how well you, even things that are oftentimes top of mind, like how well do you speak English? It doesn't matter, right? Like, can you write the code? Yep. Okay, we're good. So I think that's the first word of encouragement I'd give to anybody, is that people really do care about what you know. The other thing, which I've been thinking about a lot more lately, is when I said we talked about the particular type of diversity that exists in technology teams now. It's largely representative. I think it's largely representative of the places where people go to recruit, right? So we go to recruit at big schools in the Northeast. So we get a lot of Chinese and Indian and Middle Eastern and some white folks too in the mix. So that's kind of what our teams look like. And the question is, how do we go find people? How do we go find people who are underrepresented? And that's not always obvious. So, I think that setting the other half of this, in addition to noting that the people care about what you know, is how you can set yourself up for success by being in the right place to frankly be recruited, right? And if you can do those two things, you're in a good situation. And then once you're there, if you want to address this problem within an organization, every organization, it's a theme we're going to come back to over and over again. Every organization is looking for business value. So, if you're saying, look, man, it's really expensive to hire these kids out of MIT, but, we can solve two things. One, we can get some of our underrepresented populations in, and we can get, maybe a little more value and hire people a little cheaper by going to a great engineering school like Central Florida. Like, okay, there we go. There's some good value that we can find. Because sometimes when we have this conversation about diversity, people try to sell it as a one-way ticket, and we should have diversity and because it's good. Okay, fair enough. And as a result, you should step aside, and there's just no value for one side in that. There's always got to be value two ways. And if the value prop is that we can have diversity because it's a good thing to have, and also save a little money, at least at the start, then that's the kind of thing that's going to get people started. That's going to get people talking. And maybe it's not the ideal solution, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Doug. And yeah, I did one thing I just wanted to anchor a bit more, as you said, is understanding the recruiting patterns and finding a way to get there. I think and I know James is on the call also. James actually had gone to an event in Chicago which helped him land an internship at Ernst & Young. So these are the kind of things, guys, you have to do. Find out where the hot spots are, and again, if you want it bad enough, you find a way to get there, right? That's the way I think you could really improve your own situation. Something else I'll ask you real quick, Doug, rapid fire again. Knowing what you know now, what would you do differently in college?
Oh, man. I would have spent less time at Boone Saloon. But what would I have done differently? Ooh, that's a good question. Things have worked out pretty well. So I don't know that I would have done anything grossly differently. I guess part of me thinks maybe instead of doing a theoretical math track, I would have done one that was more applied. I'd say I wish I was more involved in student life, but like I said, I showed up on campus. I was 26, so I didn't have a lot in common with the 18-year-olds that were there. I don't know that I would have done that. I think the thing I would have done most differently in undergrad is probably tried to forge some more connections with the people I was going to school with, who were also, UIS does have a reasonably sizable both veteran community as well as kind of non-traditional student community as well. And I had a real singular focus when I was there of getting done, which for many people who are non-traditional students, it's understandable, right? Like, I'm not there to hang out and drink bad beer and have fun. I'm there because this is expensive to be here. I'm putting my life on hold. I'm getting kind of old. Let's be done. But I think that really came at the expense of the fact that if you ask me who I know from UIS right now, I'd say, I know Haichi and I know John, right? Like, those are the folks I know. If you ask me who the classmates I know or even remember their names, I don't, I can't remember anybody's name. I maybe went out and grabbed a beer with one of them once. I would have definitely tried to do a better job with that. Is that as I get older and older, and as I also move around the country more and more and advance my career, what I've realized is less and less of my value that I'm providing to companies, less and less of my life in general is about the things I know, and it's more about the network of folks that you have that you can call on. So yeah, I think definitely would have done a much better job of that in UIS than I did.
Good stuff, man. I like that. And what's a book that you'd recommend to this audience, Doug?
Oh, that's a good question. Depends on how cynical you are. So whenever people ask me about getting into data science, I recommend a trinity of books for them to read. The first one is Moneyball. Because Moneyball is really about the analytics revolution and how we use analytics to find value and how we use data to find value. So that's book number one. Book number two, which is probably the best written of them, well, it's probably the second best written of them, but maybe most informative. It came out a few years ago. It's called The Signal and the Noise by Nate Silver, who cut his teeth in baseball analytics and then predicted the 2012 election extraordinarily well. Has a cool website called 538 that's worth reading.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but essentially it's just a book about the science of prediction. And then when you want to get super cynical, read The Black Swan or Fooled by Randomness or Anti-Fragile or anything in the Incerto series by Nassim Taleb, who cut his teeth as an options trader, and whose most well respected book is simply titled Dynamic Hedging. Dude's very serious, but it's basically a 5-part series about statistics, probability, uncertainty, and risk, and it's really good. The only problem with Taleb is Taleb's a very smart guy, and you can tell he's very smart in how he writes because he will tell you that he is a very smart guy. So it's a little tricky sometimes, but it's really good stuff. And then the last book I would recommend, just the last 2 books I'd recommend. There's a lot of good ones just because they're super cool. Actually, we'll do 3 more.
Let's go, man. Let's go.
Misbehavior of Markets by Mandelbrot, really good. It's an inquiry into the nature of risk, uncertainty, and parametrics in the world. There's a professor called Andrew Lowe who wrote a book called Adaptive Markets recently, which talks about something called the efficient market hypothesis, which, again, if you're a quantity person, is really interesting. Has some really interesting applications to predictive technologies, and how we kind of square things like efficient markets with cognitive biases, and that's what adaptive markets are. And then the last one, I promise this is the last one, the field that I learned that I come back to over and over and over again in my life, that has been the most important piece of math that I've learned, is information theory. And there's a great book called Elements of Information Theory that I would highly recommend picking up. Work through the first 3 chapters. It'll change your life. I was talking to a friend of mine, a colleague of ours, who's a MD, PhD at MGH, right? studying infectious disease, and the fact that there are different types of randomness, and some random events are more random than others, just like blew his mind, right? And that's chapter 1. So yeah, there we go. So that is my 8 books that I would recommend.
Man, so the previous podcast, the same thing happened. I think we asked a gentleman for a recommendation. He gave like 3, but you just went on a whole different level. But that's awesome. Yeah, I love it. There's just a couple more questions left, and we'll let you go. I promise. The 3 programming languages you think an aspiring data science should be pretty comfortable with?
Yep, absolutely. So number 1, SQL. Everybody's got to know SQL. SQL does relational databases. Good news is SQL's easy. Bad news is you have to do it. The better news is as you get more senior, you get other people to write your SQL queries for you. The SQL is absolutely number 1. Number 2, depends a little bit on the flavor of data scientist you want to be. If you want to be more of a statistical consultant, R is very popular. If you'd like to do more of the AI, machine learning, and programmatic stuff, Python, extraordinarily popular. And then, for a third one, I think the third one is almost finding some frameworks you like. So oddly enough, things like Scala are very popular for orchestration, and Spark and Hadoop. I think it's Scala. So that might be a good one to learn. C++ is always great to have in your back pocket if you have to do anything ultra high performant, or Java, because Java's kind of the language of enterprise software now. So that's another good one to have in your pocket. So I'd say SQL, one of either R or Python, and then a third one, kind of dealer's choice, but from Scala, C++, or Java.
Next, you have a question, Aaron? I saw your hand up.
How many people use C++? I need to know this, okay? C++ is like...
Yeah, you're right. I think C# is what people use now, right?
Okay, yeah, that's more reason.
Some flavor of C.
Yeah.
Some flavor of C.
What are some resources you'd recommend? Again, thinking for that, aspiring data science, what are some resources you'd recommend? You mentioned GitHub earlier on. Any other resources you'd recommend?
Yeah, so for reading, Meet Towards Data Science, Medium, both have some great material on there. I really, and archives as well, ARXIV has lots of kind of preprints of papers that you can read. So I think those are good for practicing coding. I really like Project Euler. I think it's Project Euler, or the Euler Project, which is a math programming site, and they have something like a couple hundred challenges on there that get exponentially harder.
Wow.
HackerRank. I like HackerRank. You should check out HackerRank. And you should check out HackerRank for 2 reasons. 1, they have some interesting challenges, and 2, increasingly companies that do timed tests as part of their onboarding or part of their interviews use HackerRank to do it. So yeah, it's good to get familiar with. So I think those are both excellent resources. My best friend in the world is Stack Overflow.
Yep.
So that's good. And then it's going to be some more reading. I recommend anybody interested in getting into the working world start reading The Economist, because that's just going to let you know. That's going to let you know what your executive leadership cares about, because they all read The Economist too. And then you're going to read it and you're going to think about it in terms of data science and how we use AI to tackle the things that they care about. Perfect. There we go. There we go, man. It's a good one.
All right. That's what's up.
Side note, I'm pretty sure the reason I got into MIT is there's an interview and I casually dropped that I read The Economist, and the tenor of the interview changed a little bit. Yeah, so highly recommend that one. So there we go.
That's awesome, man. That's really good.
We got 2 kind of technical reading things to do with Medium and Towards Data Science, 2 practice your coding skill resources, and then something that just helps you know what people in business care about.
I think I see your hand up, Aaron. Go ahead, man.
How do you read ARXIV? Those is like some of the hardest papers I like.
So absolutely, and I'll tell you exactly how. When I moved back to Boston, I found a deep learning discussion group, and all they did that all day, every day. So I joined it once a week. I tried to read the paper, and at first it was hard, but after about 3 months of being in this group, you kind of just learn the language and get to a point where you can read them yourself. And I was part of that group for about 6 months, the first 6 months I lived here. And then I just kind of didn't have time to be part of it, but it was fine because the goal there was I'd like to be able to get to a point where I can read the latest machine learning paper and understand what they're talking about.
That is literally my goal. I'm like, if I can get to the point where I can do research, I'm good to go. Like,
so yeah, So highly find a deep learning discussion group, and again, if you're in school, professors are, in my experience, creatures of ego. So if you've read a paper and you're not understanding it, say, Professor, you're so smart, you're so wise. Let me understand this. And they'll find time.
Man, right. Good stuff. Good discussion, guys. Doug, last question from me, I promise, and then I'll open it up to the floor, and then we can let you go. But this has been amazing, man. Thank you so much. Where can people connect with you, Doug?
I think the best place is on LinkedIn right now. Doug Hamilton. You'll find me. It's a much younger photo. I think I look old. So that's the best place. I've been thinking about making a Twitter page, but the problem is to tweet out all my wonderful quanti thoughts. But the challenge is I have a Facebook page, and I never use it except for after a few too many bottles of wine, and then I always regret it afterwards. And I just assume that if I have a Twitter page, it'd be the same thing. So I'm avoiding most social media as a result.
Good stuff, man. Like I said, just a lot of value. Anyone who, you guys on the call and those who are going to be listening, so much value was brought here. So when we release this episode, man, please share that with everyone who's aspiring to get in the data science space. Any last questions, guys, before we let... Oh, yeah, definitely, James. We'll have the video. Yes, sir. Any last questions for Doug before I let him go?
Okay, quick. Oh, no. You go first. Yours is more.
All right, Greg, go ahead.
So at work, like I said, I'm currently a software developer, but I'm trying to make that transition. What would you suggest could be a small, and I work for LSU, so I'm in education, but maybe like a small project that I can do to go to my management and say, hey, I'm serious about this. If you guys want me to mature in this role, I can.
That's a good question. Well, let's think about it this way. What challenges does your management currently face? Like what are the things they care about on a day-to-day basis? Or what sort of initiatives do they have at your organization?
So right now it's just a push for recruiting. We're trying to scale up our student base. So everything is built around marketing and recruiting.
Yeah. So let's take that marketing angle. So, does your marketing team have a data science component?
Nope.
Perfect. All right. So we're going to do something very traditional. Remember we talked about statistical testing. So one thing you might say is, look, I assume that if you have a platform, you probably collect some user data. You collect things like how often people log in, people who log in, when they stop logging in, how successful they are once they've enrolled, etc. So there's a lot of things you can tackle on there, and I think what you want to do is find one of those areas that they care about, one of those KPIs, right, key performance indicators they really care about, and say, look, we're trying lots of things. How do we know if any of them work? I have great news for you. This is a well-studied program in statistics, a well-studied problem in data science. We could spin up some semi-automated ways, a suite, right? Like an A/B testing suite. So we would say, here's what we're doing, right? Here's our program that we've rolled out. Here are the people who are receiving it. Here are the people who are not receiving it. Here's the comparison of how they're performing. And you build them a little dashboard. You build them an A/B test. And all of a sudden you just show them that, look, I can use programming and statistics to immediately provide value to the company, because the programs that aren't working, let's get rid of them, right? Like, let's use the money for something else. And the programs that are working, maybe we want to invest more money into them. And we can bring that visibility to you. And if we can start, you can start there, then you can start asking questions about, well, what about, how do we use predictive analytics or machine learning to find students who are beginning to fail or who are beginning to be unsuccessful and point them in the right direction, right? Which is also a really cool service you can have. And it's certainly something that almost every education platform does. The other thing you can do is you can look for what people like Pluralsight or Education First are doing in this area, and just suggest that you guys do some of the same things. Right, so look.
Awesome, thank you. Sorry, my son's.
You're good, man. Man, great response, Greg, and great question from Greg also. Aaron, you had a question?
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Okay, go ahead, James. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to ask a candid, an open-hearted question. Doug, so how much can you recommend someone for maybe an intern position or an entry-level position?
I can absolutely recommend people for them. I don't have any entry-level positions at the moment, and obviously our internship is wrapping up this year. But I can absolutely recommend people. Yeah, I know the guy who does the hiring pretty well.
Yeah, and you know, good question, James. I just wanted to throw out, guys. By the way, all of you, man, I think the networks Doug has, right? Because the way LinkedIn works, if your network posts something, you could see it too. So definitely, if you haven't done so yet, connect to Doug on LinkedIn so you can learn from him and his networks and see the kind of things they're posting and sharing, and that could also impact you and your learning as in the data science space.
Yeah. The other thing that's going to make you stand out when you interview, managers like the hiring manager likes talking to you about the technical thing, but if you can talk to the hiring manager about the thing that they care about, you're in, man. You're in.
Yep. Good stuff. Aaron, you had a question?
Okay, this is sidetrack. You mentioned M.I.T. I just wanted to know, like, is it just me, or is he like just like out of this world kind of smart? Like, I try to talk. Have you ever gotten to the point? Have you ever tried to talk to him and have him like talk way over your head? Like,
he's great. He's great. Yeah, no, he's super smart. He's super bright. He's on point. I was very fortunate. I was able to do a couple independent studies with him.
Same.
On special functions and prime number theory. And yeah, it was eye opening, right? Like, dude, he's great. Yeah, really great guy.
Yeah, okay, that was it.
All
right.
Just to give some context for those who don't know who M.I.T is, M.I.T is the Department of Mathematics chair at the University of Illinois at Springfield. So any listeners who think about studying math at, in Illinois, UIS has a really good program. M.I.T is amazing. Yeah, M.I.T was the first, maybe the second person, I think, when I moved to Springfield to give me a teaching opportunity, and he's been a mentor since. So yeah, man, he's an amazing guy. So yeah, Aaron, happy to hear that you guys have similar experiences. All right, guys, if we don't have any questions left, I just want to say a huge thank you, Doug, for your time. I feel like Manu gave us so much value, and what I love about technology is this thing could live on. So many other people who are seeking that data science track could just kind of milk this episode and get so much value that they could implement, and literally that will just catapult them into really successful careers. So thank you so much. I wish you all the best, and I look forward to your that 5-year outlook. And hopefully, if I'm in the Boston area, which I hope to be when some point after COVID, just for a visit or something, we'll definitely connect, man.
Perfect. Sounds good. Well, thanks for having me, Kazim. It was a lot of fun, and best of luck to everybody here in their future careers.
Thanks, Zach. Have a good one, man. Bye-bye.